A state of shock is not just what happens to us when something bad happens. It's what happens to us when we lose our narrative, when we lose our story, when we become disoriented. What keeps us oriented and alert and out of shock is our history. So a period of crisis like the one we're in is a very good time to think about history, to think about continuities, to think about roots. It's a good time to place ourselves in the longer human story of struggle.
The story begins on June the 1st, 1951, when representatives of Western intelligence agencies secretly met with academics at Montreal's Ritz-Carlton Hotel. This meeting contributed to military-funded research into the effects of sensory deprivation at McGill University.
Sensory deprivation really is a way of producing extreme monotony. It causes loss of critical capacity. The thinking is less clear. The subject complains that he can't even daydream. And when you have college students that can't daydream, they're in a bad way. I began to think while we were doing our experiments that it's possible that something that involves physical discomfort or even pain might be more tolerable than simply the deprivation conditions that we studied.
Hebb decided to stop work on the research.
But I had no idea when I suggested that what a vicious weapon, potentially vicious weapon, this could be.
These are the days and hours are the occasions.
But experiments at McGill continued under the ambitious head of psychiatry, Dr. Ewan Cameron.
What he did was much more than what we had done. We did our work strictly with the understanding that the subject could get up and walk out at any point he wished to, and some of them did.
Cameron's patients were not so lucky. The Allen Memorial Institute, where he worked, began to resemble a macabre prison, where Cameron performed bizarre experiments on his psychiatric patients. Cameron wanted to de-pattern or wipe clean his patient's mind, so he could rebuild them from a blank slate. Janine Huard was a young mother of 4, suffering from postnatal depression.
I used to shiver when they told me about, you're going to get a shock treatment tomorrow. I used to shiver. I was so scared of it. And I would wake up in another room, all mixed up and sad, and it used to make me very sad after. You're just like a zombie walking around.
Cameron combined shock therapy with sleep therapy and the repeated playing of taped messages.
It says, Janine, Janine, you are running away from your responsibility. You don't want to take care of your husband and children. All the time, the same thing.
It sounds like you were being interrogated.
Yes, interrogation, but for what purpose?
It wasn't long before the CIA put Cameron's research into practice. Many of his techniques appear in the agency's Kubark Counterintelligence Interrogation Manual. These words are from the manual.
It's a fundamental hypothesis of this handbook that these techniques are in essence methods of inducing regression of the personality. There is an interval, which may be extremely brief, of suspended animation, a kind of psychological shock or paralysis. Experienced interrogators recognize this effect when it appears and know that at this moment the source is far more open to suggestion, far likelier to comply than he was just before he experienced the shock.
At the same time as Ewan Cameron was conducting his experiments in Montreal, an exponent of another kind of shock was working not so far away. Milton Friedman was teaching economics at the University of Chicago. He believed economic shock therapy could encourage societies to accept a purer form of deregulated capitalism. In October 2008, in the midst of the biggest financial crisis since 1929, Naomi Klein went to the University of Chicago to talk about Milton Friedman.
When Milton Friedman turned 90, the Bush White House held a birthday party for him. And everyone made speeches, including George Bush. But there was a really good speech that was given by Donald Rumsfeld. My favorite quote in that speech from Rumsfeld is this. He said, "Milton is the embodiment of the truth that ideas have consequences." What I want to argue here is that the economic chaos that we're seeing right now on Wall Street and on Main Street and in Washington stems from many factors, of course, but among them are the ideas of Milton Friedman.
The Wall Street crash of 1929 led to the Depression of the 30s. Central to Friedman's thesis was his opposition to the New Deal, announced by President Franklin Roosevelt in his inaugural speech.
Our greatest primary task is to put people to work. This is no unsolvable problem if we face it wisely and courageously. Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Influenced by the economist John Maynard Keynes, Roosevelt started a program of public employment to get people back to work.
Today, depression is a fading memory. Millions of men and women have found employment, and with it, confidence and hope.
It wasn't that simple. The Depression lasted into World War II. But after the war, the Marshall Plan spread Keynes's model of government regulation